Some of you know that I have a 5-year-old son. My son and I love to listen to Bob Dylan. So the other night, when he was trying to fall asleep, Finn asked me, "What is fate?" I was a bit surprised by the question, and so I asked him where he'd heard the word, and he said, "A simple twist of fate." Ah, yes. In the midst of trying to answer his question, I told him that our life here in Boise is all due to a simple twist of fate. Later that night, I discovered it was time to name my sermon for you all. So, due to a simple twist of fate, I decided to preach on Bob Dylan this week. Fate feels like a heavy word to me, devoid of hope. It's just the way it's going to be. It reminds me of the old Calvinist theology that our movement once rebelled against. Some of us are fated to heaven and some to hell, and there's nothing we can do about it. Fate, heavy, inevitable. A twist of fate, on the other hand, invites a little unpredictability. In the song, Bob Dylan tells the story of a one-night stand. The man who experienced this twist of fate was not prepared for it. He was living as if nothing like that would ever happen to him, but he wished that he'd prepared himself. She looked at him and he felt a spark tingle to his bones. 'Twas then he felt alone and wished that he'd gone straight and watched out for a simple twist of fate. What does it mean to watch out for a simple twist of fate? How do we live when we expect that spark to happen at any time, at any place? Or how do we live when we don't think we're worthy? By the end of the song, the man lives in expectation of just one more twist of fate. One more experience of being seen, being loved, if just for a moment. We are left with the image of this man, perhaps a little disheveled, probably a little crazy, wandering the streets. He walks along with a parrot that talks, hunts her down by the waterfront docks where the sailors all come in. Maybe she'll pick him out again. How long must he wait one more time for a simple twist of fate? Will she pick him out again? We suspect she never will because he says, "I lost the ring. She was born in spring, but I was born too late." He believes that he lost something, or he just wasn't born when he was supposed to be, and that dream will never come true. What a familiar feeling of regret. If only I'd been born a moment sooner. Picturing that old man at the waterfront reminds me of a Bible story from my childhood. The disciples, after Jesus had been killed, are back at their old work as fishermen. They are struggling to get fish, and they must have felt a little bit like that old man with a parrot on his shoulder. Their faith is shattered. They're born too late. The person who was supposed to change everything is gone. A stranger shows up at the shore and asks them to put out their nets again. They mysteriously end up with a bountiful catch. In the sunrise, on the shore, they share breakfast with the stranger. He breaks bread. They suddenly know who he is. A simple twist of fate. The divine shows up. How do we live when we believe that each new stranger we meet could be the incarnate divine, coming to shower us with grace? I have been in that place where the hand of fate seems heavy, where I felt like a fool to expect grace in my life, where regrets filled my mind and weighed me down. And then something happened. The divine showed up. She picked me out again. And when she did, I made a move that seemed scary, risky, like I was destroying everything in hopes that the new life that emerged would be more fully my own, more alive, more full of grace. I have encountered those twists again and again, and I have jumped into them with the full force of my being. And today, I am nowhere I ever expected to be. And yet, I'm at home. How did I come to be here? I spent my young life in love with the idea of being a pastor, just like my dad. I was in love with the passion, the purpose, with following the call of love at every turn. And yet I found myself in a bit of a shell. I was shy, unsure of myself with other kids, bullied sometimes. I didn't feel very intelligent. I didn't feel very capable of making friends and influencing people. But I had this naive dream that someday someone would give me a church to shepherd and all of that awkwardness would just melt away. When I was in high school, I memorized a prayer by John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement in which I grew up. The prayer was an act of surrendering everything to the divine. Let me be exalted by thee or brought low by thee. Let me be full, let me be empty. Let me have all things, let me have nothing, the prayer said. It brought me great peace for a time. But I set it aside when I began to sense that I had believed too much in the likelihood of being brought low, being empty, having nothing. And I had accepted other people treating me like I was small. Yes, it can be healthy to let go of our expectations for what our life will bring us, find meaning in the suffering just as we do in the joy. But deep down, what do we really expect? Really? Do we expect all the love and grace in the world to come pouring towards us, through us, blessing the entire universe? Do we expect the divine to pick us out again and again and again? When I was young, I thought it was harder to expect suffering than joy. But as I have grown, I've begun to see that indeed it can be harder to expect joy than suffering. Expecting the divine can be extremely challenging. I spent my 20s trying all sorts of ways to get to know the person inside that shell of mine. And while I got a lot more confident in myself, I still felt that the shell was still there. At 30, I went to seminary, hoping that coming home to my original calling would also bring me home to myself. But ministry in the United Methodist setting just didn't feel right to me. And at the end of seminary, my son showed up. A sign of something magical making itself happen in my life beyond my wildest expectations. And yet, in the first few years of Finn's life, my husband and I just didn't have enough money to get by. We lived in a tiny apartment with toxic mold. We lost everything, even our cars. And I was unsure for a time if I would ever regain my health or my sanity. My marriage didn't hold up to these burdens, and I found myself pushed down both within my family and without. What was I to do? Pray for acceptance, to endure? What did I expect? I expected love. That incarnational theology of the divine around every turn was the bread and butter of the sermons and stories I heard growing up. I expected her to pick me out again somehow, some way, and I began to search for it. I remember walking through the streets of the city, pushing my son in a stroller, wishing I had a car, but deeper down, remembering the old African proverb, it takes a whole village to raise a child. And I kept asking myself, where's my village? That's exactly what brought me into Troop Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena. I was looking for my village, and I found it. As I received love there and an opportunity to lead from my passions, I felt the divine at work again in my life. She picked me out again. And as I returned to seminary, this time as a UU, I realized that I had always been on a path that was leading me here. Because even though I had stopped saying those particular words in that Wesleyan prayer, I had thoroughly dedicated myself to a life of service and passion, and there simply wasn't any way I could turn that off. And as soon as I saw the way that UUs are together, my old dream of a church that would feel like home came flooding back. She'd picked me out again, and I wasn't going to lose her this time. Seminary, the second time, threw me another twist. A big one, actually. While I was taking sexual ethics at Star King School for the Ministry, I discovered that I had never honestly taken a look at my own sexuality. I'd always let the desire to have a protective man in my life overshadow the fact that I fall in love with women, not so much with men. Yeah, I'm lesbian. And though I had been in love with many of my friends, I never expected one of them to love me like that. I just didn't see that particular form of divine love staring me in the face. And so just this last spring, as I sank into my body and an honest sense of my own pleasure, I began to look again for that new love. Even though I felt old to be discovering my sexual orientation, the divine was there, ready to help me be who I am. My shell finally fell away. She picked me out again. The stark contrast between my life now, in a beautiful town, in a lovely apartment, surrounded by loving people who appreciate and support me, and my life just a few years ago, just before I wandered into the UU church and began to find myself again, the contrast is so great that I still feel in shock. The traumatized part of me expects it to all fall apart again at any minute. But in order to fully embrace my time here, I've had to open up, release my fears, and say to myself, yes, it is that good. She picked you out again, and she's not going away anytime soon. My trust in divine imminence has just gotten stronger. Because when I was determined to find that love, she was right there. And when I was determined to dedicate my life to sharing that love, a way opened up before me, full of everything I need to become the loving servant leader I long to be someday. What do we expect? I feel that magic happens when I begin to watch out for that simple twist of fate. when I expect all the love and grace in this world to come towards me, flow through me, and bless the entire universe. In Bob Dylan's last verse, he sings, "People tell me it's a sin to know and feel too much within. I still believe she was my twin." I believe that if we aren't caught up expecting grace from the places that our cultures tell us it can be found, from money or from sworn poverty, from a one-night stand or from always avoiding one-night stands, from bodily beauty defined by magazines or from trying to escape our body all the time, if we stop expecting the divine to show up in all these places someone once told us it would, we can expect her and see her all around. We can know and feel so much within, and it won't be too much. We can still believe our twin is out there in some form, ready to pick us out again and again and again. She is our life's deep joy and passion, and we can't lose her. Have people told you it's a sin to know and feel too much within? When we expect divine love, there may be those voices telling us it will never happen, that we should forget what we know, that we should shut it down. And so if you feel that way, if you feel that you have needed to dampen your knowing, to let go of your hoping, then I will ask of you this. Keep expecting your divine twin. Keep expecting her to pick you out again and again and again. You don't need to know where she'll be. There's no predicting her. You know she's wild. But she shows up. Oh, she shows up. And she picks us again and again and again.